All right, well, thank you all for being here with us today. My name is Carrie Dillon. I'm the Managing Director of the International Textile Alliance. We are the association who produces interwoven textile fare by ITA. Thank you for joining us today. We're here for Textiles 101 with Kevin Von Allman. Little brief bio, Kevin attended North Carolina State University, where he majored in textile technology and graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in 1999. Kevin has been proudly employed at Valdez Weavers for nearly 28 years and has held numerous impactful roles that focus on product development, research, and design. Kevin currently resides in Hickory, North Carolina with his wife, 4 children, and 4 cats. He is an avid pickleball player and outdoor enthusiast. With that, I am going to bring Kevin up. Let me go ahead and get the presentation up for you. Just move this on down. Okay. Oh,
thank you.
There you go. Thanks.
Thanks for coming. I know your time is very valuable, and I appreciate you coming to spend some time with me this morning. I'm going to cover a ton of material. And so I'd like to kind of just keep rolling through it. If you have questions, I am here all day. I'll be glad to stay as long as you'd like to talk about textiles. You think after I talk for 30 or 45 minutes that I'd be done, but that is only the beginning. As Carrie mentioned, 28 years with Valdez Weavers. I'll talk a little bit about that so you'll kind of know a little bit more about my history and maybe my experience. It has primarily been at the mill level for all facets from design, the manufacturability of Jacquard textiles. And we'll go through, and again, I'd love to answer any questions at the end. So Valdez Weavers, who are we? Where are we? We're 100% ESOP, which means the company is basically held in trust. Every year, just for being employed there, we are given shares. So that unfortunately they're not like Apple shares, which would be great, but the company invests in us as we invest in the company. We are right down the road in Valdez, which is about an hour and a half away, straight down Interstate 40. We have 4 facilities that are all within 5 miles of each other, so it's great to have all this verticality in a very close proximity. We mainly participate in 2 different markets. One of them is residential, the main reason you're all here today. And so that can be anywhere from furniture manufacturers that you may be seeing, accessories, fabric distributors, lifestyle retailers. We don't sell anything to the public, but we probably sell to any other fabric manufacturer that you may come into contact with. If you're also in the contract arena, we have a large customer base there as well. And so we're probably a 60-40 split residential and contract, which is great. When COVID hits and people don't travel, what do? You invest in your home. So we have that residential market that is eager and ready for that. Once COVID subsides, people start traveling again. Hotels realize they need to refurbish their spaces. And so that really plays into this contract market. So it might be office environments, task seating, and then hospitality sites. We do a lot of stuff for Disney and projects. So really anybody in an upholstery fabric application, we probably have some kind of interaction with them. And then some specialty markets. This is not quite the volume that the 2 main areas that we focus on, but we do some apparel, some mattress, some RV, but that's really kind of more ancillary and not a real driver for our primary business segments. So the first thing that we're going to start about is design and creativity. And how did this fabric that's sitting on this chair come to fruition, and where did it start, and how was it produced? So a designer typically will start this process, getting inspiration, and then the actual manufacturing, and then the end application. So we're going to talk about all of those things from that creative process, and then how does it get manufactured. So where do we look for inspiration? Just like all of you, when you're redoing a space in your home, If you're doing craft projects with your kids, whatever it happens to be, you look outside to try to find what that is. So we follow blogs, fashion, art, cultural influences, shelter magazines, anywhere that's going to give us some impact and vibe for what's going on in the world today. So we're going to try to put our spin and our voice on that, but we really want to make sure that we're in tune with what's going on in the environment that we are trying to address. So typically in this particular case, an heirloom, it's craft, it focuses on weave structure and then comfort. So a lot of times we'll try to be inspired by all those things around us, but then we want to make it a holistic and a design idea that makes sense to people. So when we're conveying this, we want to make sure that they understand the image that we're trying to portray. And so you can see all of that from the top left image of a red white file that we'll talk about more, to a hand woven leather strips down there, to some old point paper, and then obviously some painted designs. So it really kind of is all encompassing that we do. And then we try to put those in collections. Nobody typically wants to buy just one piece of fabric. We're trying to build a whole collection, if you will, or a whole room ensemble. So we want to do something that's going to cater to the sofa, to the pillows, to the chair, to the hanging textiles, and really as it ties into your outdoor now, with so much being indoor, outdoor, and inside out, we really need to play that into what we're doing, because the colors may be a little different as you get indoor, outdoor. So we build that whole collection together. So it all starts with art, and it can be me sitting at my desk just sketching out something on paper. We can look in swatch books, as you see, documentations. We have probably 300,000 pieces of artwork. So this is all digitized, and we can access this by typing in triangles. We can type in birds with large beaks and tropical fern leaves, and we'll get 20 documents that will pop up. So whatever we think is important, or whatever our customers want to collaborate with us, we have that art inspiration. And then we do buy pieces of art from vendors that come around. You may see some as you're traveling through some of the spaces, people just selling art like they would sell lamps or accessories. So we have studios that come into the mill to show us that. So then it's really, how do you take that art, which is a very flat document, and make it into a woven fabric? So that's kind of where the architecture or the technical side comes in. So we start with creating the loom file. Again, this is just a piece of art. And what's something that you notice about this piece of art? And it can be anything. Color, you notice a color. What else? Shape. Yep, color, shapes. We all see that. We might see color a little different. We might like this or not like this, or be turned off by a certain color, but ultimately it is just to get the process started. We see this as a graphic, triangles, multicolored, watercolor effect, purples and whites. The loom knows none of that. So we've got to have a conversation. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's the same thing. Designers are this way, and the loom is a red, white file. So we take that image. Does anybody know how many colors the eye can see? 1,000, 10,000, 50,000, 4 million. It ranges anywhere from 1 million to 10 million. So I'm just going to pick something in the middle, about 4 million colors. So when you take a picture, everybody takes pictures with their phones now. And so that camera will pick up what's called little pixels, these little teeny dots. Millions and millions of pieces of information in millions and millions of colors. And we have to somehow take all of that information and get it ready for the loom. And so you'll see that multicolored there. We will reduce that down, in this case, to 9. So you can imagine if you took a picture of your family and there's millions of colors, and you have to reduce that to 9 colors. Everybody's face would be one color, their shirt might be one color red, and that's really what we've got to do in this. And you can see what's being done the light blue, medium blue, light purple, dark purple, black, and white, and maybe a light gray. So that 1 million colors has been reduced to 9. Now, as a designer, I can choose as many colors as I want. I can choose 50 colors, 100 colors, 500 colors, but I have to specify a weave that tells the loom what to do for every color that I do. I don't have time for that, so I'm going to go with 9, and I'll show you how that gets interpreted here in a few minutes. So the other thing that we have to do when I have this beautiful piece of artwork is you can see that you don't see what happens on the outsides of this. If it's in repeat, great. Somebody's done my work for me. If it's not in repeat, meaning the left matches with the right, the top matches the bottom, I have to put it in repeat. And the way that I do that is in EAT. I've reduced the colors, and then I have this file. So an artist has to go through and draw every one of these shapes, reduce all those extra colors, and redraw this entire design. Some things with this that are very simple, it may take 4 or 5 hours. If I have an all over paisley design or tropical, something with a lot of detail, it may take a week for somebody to redraw that whole design in a certain number of colors. But the other thing that you'll notice here, and this now is in repeat, you can see that these shapes repeat multiple times in the vertical and the horizontal as well. And is there anything that's objectionable here? There are numerous airports that I go through or hotels, and you see that there's something very repetitive going through, and it's like, God, that's very distracting. I want it to flow. This carpet flows very well. I can't pick anything out that's really an eyesore or really draws my eye. So I've got to make sure that I have the same thing. I don't want somebody upholstering their sofa and it's like, oh gosh, there's a dot right there. And it's really distressing my eye. So is there anything in this that you see that is objectionable or that really draws your eye to it every time you look at this picture? You might say, well, maybe this dark spot kind of points out, maybe those two. I kind of see the letter M in here a little bit in this white area. So I would kind of tweak that and modify that a little bit. Or I might say, you know what, overall, this flows pretty well. This is what's called a chopper, meaning that I can cut this design really kind of almost anywhere and upholster a sofa and it not be objectionable because it all flows so easily. So that's kind of the whole editing process. You can see on the left column that the ones with the slash through them are the colors that are in this design. Again, I can have 10, 20, 100 different colors, but this one only has 9. So now I take this information and get it ready for the loom. So we're going to do, this is a 3-layer fabric. When you see fabrics, you run your hand across it, you might say, well, this is just a flat fabric. It may have texture in the yarn, but basically fabrics are typically a single layer, what's called a damask, meaning a warp and a weft system that interlock, but it's only one filling system. If it's a 2-layer or 2 shuttle, that means 2 yarns are being thrown, basically stacked on top of each other. So what would this be? A 3-layer or a 3 shuttle. What would this be? 4. Thank you. 4-layer. So basically 4 thread systems are thrown and the weave tells what color to come to the face. So that's it. The yarn has to go all the way across the loom, which we'll see in a minute. But I am telling the loom that I have these 3 filling systems that are used, and I've got to dictate and say what happens in each one. And that's done through weave. Weave is very, very simplistic. I have a warp thread and I have a filling thread. And if 2 lines run together, what's that called? Weft. But what is it when they run perfectly aligned with each other? Parallel. So this is back to 3rd grade. When I heard this, what is this? Perpendicular, a right angle. I was like, man, I'll never use that. I use it every single day. So the perpendicular intersection, does the warp come to the face or does the filling come to the face? That's all weaving is. Every woven fabric that you see is warp up or filling up or weft up. That's it. And so in this particular case, it's plain. So the plain weave has the red warp thread And the white filling thread, typically white, the filling is larger. So I made it larger in this example. And so it's just warp up, warp down, warp up, warp down, all the way across. Then the next yarn is inserted, and it's the reverse of that. So this is a plain weave. It's the tightest weave. So actually the weave structure actually makes a fabric can be more pliable and supple, or it can be very rigid and durable. I can do a lot of that just through the weave. And even in this simple 4-weave example, the weave on the left is very tight. The weave here, the basket weave, is going to be very loose. It gives a completely different look, which is great, but I can kind of get my finger in there and I can try to separate that. And there's not a lot holding it together. I can also create movement through my weave effect, which is done in the second picture, which is a twill. This is 5 threads. Actually, this is a 3-5. So 1, 2, 3 warps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 filling. So this is a 3-5 right-handed twill. And I don't expect you to memorize all of that, but it's just showing how I talk about my warp and filling relationship and how it creates a completely different aesthetic that I'm looking for. And then I can have a satin or a sateen, which is typically the reverse. I can bring up a lot of warp, or if I flip that fabric over, I have a lot of fill. So the cool thing about a damask weave or a single layer fabric is the reverse. The back side of the fabric is just a reverse of the front side. So if warp's all up right here, on the back, it's going to be all fill. But typically we will try to do different variations of weave for durability, for aesthetic, to hold it all together and give me exactly what I'm looking for. Again, 4 very, very basic weaves. This is kind of what you learn in Textiles 101 when you're taking a weave class. So this is the first week of weaving. Now what I have to do is take this very simple base weave, and this is a 2 warps up, 1 fill up. So this is a 2-1 right-handed twill. Very, very simple. And I need to say, I want that to happen on layer 1. And on layer 2, I want to bury it. And layer 3, I want to bury it so that only layer 2 is coming to, or layer 1 is coming to the face. And so that's what's done in each one of these areas. I need to do the face weave, the layer 2 weave, and the layer 3 weave. So I'm stack building. I'm basically making a 3-layer structure in every area that comes up in this fabric. So it's a 3-story building. I'm just determining there's a window here, and here's a wall, and here's something else, and I'm doing that through my weave choices. Again, this is 9 weaves, so it's fairly simple. You can see that the color bar at each one is where it is represented on the fabric itself, and that CAD that we looked at just a few minutes ago. So this is the card file. So you have basically 2,400 little dots of information across, and I've got about 2,000 lines of code. So this goes back to computers, binary code, 1s and 0s. So Apple or whoever came up with the first computer, oh, I'm so cool and creative and all that stuff. Well, Jacquard did it in 1801. So that was the first binary code. And basically it's this one line of information, and it's white, 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 red, white, 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 red, white, 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 red. It goes all the way across, and it's basically saying lift up a thread or leave it down. That's it, 1 or 0. Every textile that you see is a computer program, 1 and 0s. That's it. And now you can say, I know what that looks like. So you can kind of see this, that it's creating something that you can kind of identify, but now the loom says, hey, I have your beautiful design, and I'm going to replicate that exactly because you gave me the information to do it. And it's only 1s and 0s. So that's red and white, hit or miss. So that's what we have. So you can see the colored file over on the left, and then the exact extrapolation of what happens out on the loom. And so that goes back to, again, 1801 and what used to be cards. So you may have seen a little music box that has a little metal wheel with the little pins on it. Well, that little dial goes around, and whenever a pin is, it does a certain note. Same thing here. When this loom took this information and it read a card, same thing. Red, white, 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 red, 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 white, white, red, red, white, red. Somebody had, when I started 28 years ago, Howard Edney was sitting up in a room, and he would do every line of information, which takes a computer program about 12 seconds to do those 2,000 lines of information. Howard would have to hit. He'd have to punch a pedal that would punch that hole to weave that fabric. And obviously that's very labor intensive. It's very easy to make a mistake. So you might have this fabric and it's not a nice, clean, plain ground until you have where Howard did the wrong thing. He'd have to get a piece of tape, come over here and tape those two little holes because he did it, he punched the wrong thing. So again, that we did away with that. We were one of the first mills to do that, to become a completely electronic. I'm assuming everybody is away from cards right now because you can see how intensive it can be. But really not much has changed. It's the same concept: warp, weft, up or down. It's a lot more, elegant now and a lot more capabilities. That's really what it is. And so you take this artwork and then you have a fabric. And again, the artwork, these are the same color. But this is where the weaver chose what weaves. So just a little color study here. So what three colors were used in this fabric? Blue, white, and then the magenta color, this purple, purple color there. Again, depending on who you are and how you see color. So those three layers, if the white comes up on the face, what's going to be on the back? Blue, magenta. You see all the blue. If you see blue on the face, there's your magenta on the back. So if it's not on the face, it's got to be on the back. Or in a 3-story building, like this little house fabric that we built, it might be in the middle. So white on the face, magenta on the back, blue in the middle. And as a designer, I have to tell the loom all of that information, because if I don't, the yarn is just going to hang out on the back and it's just going to fall to the floor. I have to weave it in. And so you can see here the fabric itself, and then all that intricate weave detail that we told the loom what to do. Here is a white warp over the magenta, black warp over the magenta, heavy black warp over the magenta. Just the warp ends or the intensity of those ends dictate that shading that I have through there. And so once we create this fabric, I look at it. So now we talked about maybe there were some objectionable places in here. Does anybody see anything that quickly your eye gravitates towards, or something that you would say is not pleasing or really draws your eye to it? Hopefully not. If you can't really say that anything, then yeah, we did pretty good. So we will do this and we'll get it tested. Everything needs to pass industry standards. Residential and contract are completely different. If you're in a hotel, if you're in an airport, you're going to get, you need abrasion that's 50,000, 100,000. People are sitting in that all day, every day. If you have a dining room chair that's in your formal dining room, how often do you eat in your formal dining room? Never. Christmas, maybe a birthday, maybe never. And so obviously the abrasion isn't the same in those. So we make sure everything gets tested. So we have a lab at our facility that will test all of these components. And it checks for tear strength. It checks for elongation, for breaking, abrasion, and pill. And so those are probably the two that you're most familiar with. And has anybody heard of abrasion? 20,000 double rubs, 30,000 double rubs. What does that mean? I don't know. It's just a number they tell me. Yep. Good. All that is this machine that you do filling direction, warp direction, and then put it over this cotton roll. And then that roll goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It runs until 3, and it runs about this fast. This is it. It goes 3,000 cycles, and what it simulates, 1, get down and up. That was 1. 2, well, it'd be pretty time consuming to have an individual do that, so this machine does it, and that's why it's called double rubs. 1 rub this way and then back. 2, 3. At 3,000, we lift it up. Have any of these fibers broken? Nope. Clamp it down. Run it for 3,000 more cycles. So every cycle, every abrasion count that you get should be a multiple of 3. So that's where you see 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. I see a lot of 50s, which was probably 51,000, but they did 50. And then it gets some insane number, 1 million double rubs, 5 million double rubs. This takes probably 8 hours to do 12,000 double rubs. Is really anybody testing fabric to 1 million? They're tying up a machine to run for 3 months to try to give you a number. I'm not going to call BS, but I don't think anybody's doing it. I think once it hits 100,000, they're going to be like, you know what? Nobody's ever going to return this. It's never going to have a problem. I'm going to put 1 million. I'm going to put 10 million double rubs on this fabric because it will never wear away. And there are some fibers, no matter how many times you do this, they will not tear. So you can say it's indestructible. What's going to happen, and you may notice this in your home. Does anybody have any pets? I mentioned 4 cats, but that's generally my kids' and wife's choice, not mine. But I do like cats. Dogs. Does anybody like wine, beer? Anybody have kids that like Sharpie markers and, you know, all creative stuff? Generally, the fabric gets so gross with dead skin, grease, oils, food spills. You wipe it up and it looks good, but some of that stuff's kind of still there. So typically fabrics kind of get more grossed out before they get worn out. But we do stand behind all of those, and you can see the values that are listed here for some industry norms. So you have that. And then pilling. So the other thing, without getting into a whole class, and I'd love for you anytime to come and we spend days on testing and pilling. So you basically have a device that goes around and it does this. And then after a certain amount of time, we say, hey, it's got a few little burrs or pill balls. It's less than 3, so I'm going to give it a 5. If it's 5 to 10, I'm going to give it a 4. If it's 10 to 15, I'm going to give it a 3. And then if it's more than that, I'm going to say it's a 2. And it does not do very well for pilling. And so that's really all it is this device going against another piece of fabric and just, do I get pill? Because obviously you don't want people to sit there, especially after 50 or 100 seatings, and then you start noticing this pill. So none of the fibers are broken. So abrasion is going to keep on going, but because of the nature of the yarns being used, it can be a pill issue, which is typical of rayon. So you might see that rayon is great, solution dyed rayon. It'll have that it will tend to pill just for the nature of the fiber itself. So different yarns have different performance characteristics. So we have that fabric and it's passed. Great. I love it. My manager loves it. This fabric's ready to go. Unfortunately, this usually takes us 3 or 4 times to get to this point. Cheyenne, how many times do you create a fabric and it's ready to go right out the gate? Hardly ever. Thank you. It never happens for me. So if you get some successes first time, the scale's too big. It passed abrasion. It's not going to color well. You didn't do a good transition between these weaves. Or I'd like a blended weave. You can even see where the purple and the magenta are blended together. That's good. Let's do some of those things. So we typically have to rework it a few times, but once it passes, then we move into the very colorful stage where we do colorful color options. So that is here. This is a trend study that we do. We want to make sure that we're in line with what's going on in the market. And so you can see that blues were a slightly downtrend, browns are up, greens are up, grays are down, and then some of the colors are pretty kind of consistent. And these things cycle. We have about 800 different customers. So we can't really just follow a few that say, hey, we love blue, or we think orange is big. We have so many different customers, so many parts of the country and so many parts of the world that we've really got to follow a lot of different trends. We can't really just say, hey, in home goods, these are the trending colors. We got to make sure we have something for everybody. So we look at those trend studies. We also do in industry studies and see what's going on. We look at publications, so baked clay and desert tones. So we will provide this information to the design group and say, hey, these are the colors that we want you to create in this fabric. This is great, but this is only one color. And who doesn't really like blue? There's some people that don't. So you're not going to buy this if I only offer it in blue. But now, do you like terracotta? Do you like an emerald green or some great green that reminds you of the outdoors? Maybe that was a little too bright and maybe you like a little more subdued. So not only do the colors kind of change, but their intensity and their vibrancy also may change. So you may have the same kind of green palette, it's just more muted. It's more vibrant, whatever it happens to be. And I've got to now take the fabrics that I've just created that have just passed testing, and I've got to make them beautiful for as broad an audience as I can. And so that is creating the colorways. So we have all of these different yarns here. You can see this is just one yarn bank. So it's a polyester yarn. We get it white and we dye it, which you'll see in the next process. And then I've got to combine these. So in the fabric that's here, how many colors do I need to put together? Three. Thank you. I don't care what three. It can be light yellow, medium yellow, and dark yellow. It doesn't matter. I've got to do what I think will be saleable. And so you can see that here in the graphic. Down here, there was the artwork, and you can see three different colors, and that's how they have colored this item. So there's a green colorway, kind of a neutral colorway, and then a red vibrant coloration as well. And to get that, we have to run hundreds of little swatches that we look through. So you can see here, there's a pattern on the left, there's a pattern in the middle, and then there's a pattern on the right, but it kind of shows you some of the colorways that we have. So we will run filling combinations of 3 in this case, and then we'll weave it on the blanket. So I'll have probably 500 of these little squares per pattern. And I don't know if I'm doing something here. Do y'all hear like the hum?
Yeah, your mouth just fell.
Sorry. Okay. I know I'm all over the place, so I'm sure it's me. Down here. It's okay. So our colorist will run these colorways, they'll weave them, and they'll decide which ones are suited for this pattern. So again, of that 500, I'm going to narrow it down to 8 or 10 or 12. I'd love to show them all, but most people aren't going to spend the time and look through 500. So I'm trying to show you the ones that, based on all of our trend analysis and what typically sells, we're going to put that out. But we kind of have a secret stash in the back that if, hey, we didn't pick the colors that you like, I've got 487 little swatches for you to look through. And you can pick whatever color you want, and we will weave that up for our customers. So this, we try to do most of the culling for them and give them colors that work well. But it's very typical of a customer to say, I love this, but the green that you have, we're doing a blue and yellow coloration. Can you sub out that green for yellow? All I do is find that yellow fill yarn. I tie it into the loom with the other blue and whatever color's there, hit go, and it weaves it with that yellow color that our customer was asking for. So that's kind of the design process, again, from inspiration all the way through to the technology and getting a file done. We show that to our customers here at Interwoven. Our customers will pick these things, and then we have to produce it. So that's the creative fun part. Now it's the repeatability and making sure that it's the same thing every time. It starts with fiber, kind of like you had the inspiration and all that stuff from the creative side. Manufacturing is very similar. It's very process oriented. I start with fiber made into a yarn. It's either solution dyed or we dye it in house. We make the warp, we do the weaving, we do the finishing, and we do the testing. We are so blessed that an hour and a half down the road, 4 facilities within 5 minutes of each other, we do all of these things. I'm not calling up to New England. I'm not calling Mexico. I'm not calling anywhere else in the States to get these things done. It's us. And if you don't like your color, and if we did something that's not right, I can't point a finger at anybody but us, because we did it all. And that's where we're a little different than most of our competition. They may weave something and finish it, but they don't do anything up top. They may dye a yarn and they may weave it, but they don't finish it and they don't make their own warp. So it gives us the ultimate flexibility, number one, in what we want to make, because we decide what warp we're going to make, what color we're going to dye it, how we're going to weave it. And then it makes us ultimately responsible for every aspect. You're not getting a roll and it was like, well, when it left our facility, it looked great. You need to talk to the finisher, because the finisher must have messed it up. Or vice versa, that they'll say, hey, we got this and it was bad weaving. We're responsible for every aspect there. So in those yarn components, we talked a little bit about the design process. As a designer, when I have that artwork, I have all of this to evaluate. Do I want it natural or synthetic? What's the look? What's the end use? And how does it need to perform? Cotton is not going to perform typically as well as a polyester. If I'm designing something that I want environmentally friendly, we have sequal yarn that is plastic specifically taken out of the ocean and made into a yarn. That's important to a lot of people. It may not be important to you, but for those that are, we have to address that. And that's why we have all this matrix that we've got to look at. It might be a yarn's expensive or inexpensive, and all of those play into how I'm going to interpret this fabric and create it, as well as where it's supplied in the world. So you can kind of see some durabilities, light fatness, some different characteristics of different yarns. And we make that determination when we're creating our fabrics. So yarn types, again, Textiles 101, I'd love to have you for about 3 weeks and we could dig into all of these things, which is what each of these topics really needs. But basically yarn types fall into 3 very simplistic categories of filament yarn. Man-made yarns, you're taking a petroleum-based, typically a petroleum-based product, and you are extruding that through, who likes a rain shower head? All those little individual things come down. Same way with a filament yarn. There's a spinneret. It has 64 holes in it. This molten lava, the polymers extruded through that, 64 little spider webs all come down, and then I texture them for a yarn. So that's a filament yarn. Each one of those strands, like a spider web, is continuous in that fiber. We also have spun yarns. So cotton, if you've ever had a cotton puff that you've seen, it actually has each cotton fiber is about 1.5 inches or 2 inches, depending on where you are in the world and who grows it and what type of cotton it is. It's about 1.5 inches, but it's a lot of little teeny fibers. Those fibers are laid in a bed. They're going in every different direction. How do you orient your hair? What do? Comb it. So you comb the cotton. So all these fibers that are in here like this get combed. So they're all oriented the same way. It produces a big sliver, which I twist and thin out those fibers. And so spun yarns are held together by twist. And the impact that twist has, if you have a towel, you've just taken a shower, you've dried off, and you have this towel, what happens if you just hold each side? It's limp. It just hangs out between each hand. If I give Cheyenne an end and I hold an end and I twist it 2 times, what happens? Well, it's here, it now becomes this. If I twist it 2 more times, it becomes pretty straight. But what happens with that? It's not drapable anymore. It's hard and rigid. Great for testing, not great for hand. So every spun yarn has a blend of what types of fibers and how long are each one of those little fibers, or staple is what it's called, and how tightly are they twisted. More twist, great for contract, much more durable. Less twist, great for residential, not as durable. So we try to balance these things as well. But the spun yarns can be cotton, rayon, polyester, and acrylic. And so to make a polyester spun yarn, you take this filament, which is how it's extruded, and you chop it. You chop it into 2-inch lengths, and then you card it, and you comb it, and you sliver, and you twist it, and you have something very, very similar to a cotton yarn or spun yarn. And so that's how you can make different things. The cool thing about man-made yarns, unlike cotton, is I can do anything that I want to with it. I can put a coating on it. I can make where that spinneret is up here and it has 64 holes. Instead of each one of them being a circle, I can make it a triangle. I can make it an oval. I can make it an ellipse. I can even make it a hollow core so that it's a sleeve of a spider web, which has insulating properties. So inner linings in a jacket, because of that being just a hollow, it traps air inside. It holds in and retains your heat. So just because of man-made fiber, I can make it perform in a lot of different ways. If I have that triangle, which is called a delta profile, light is going to reflect off of that and go right back to your eye, and you're going to get a lot of that. So it's shiny. If it's round, only a little bit of that reflection comes back to your eye. It's not very shiny. If I have things that have these weird shapes, it's great at wicking because water will go into that little channel and be wicked away. So a lot of different things that we can do in the man-made arena. Wool is great that it doesn't burn. And that, that's, so they have some inherent properties. Cotton is great at, moisture retention. And so there's different things that are inherent to some fibers, but the man-made are really where it's cool. And then the last part is novelty yarn, chenilles, bouclés, slubs. I don't just want a simple filament yarn. I don't want a spun yarn. I want some cool stuff. And that's really where the end comes in. Chenille is like a pipe cleaner. Bouclés are where yarns are this filament yarn or the spun yarns are all fed, but there's overfeeding. So it builds on itself and it becomes very loopy. So there's a lot of cool stuff in the novelty arena. And this is what we have to play with. This is just some of the yarns that we have. If you need polyester, boom, the whole 2 left columns. If you need a novelty, the ones in the middle at the top. If you need recycled, the bottom one in the middle. And then the olefin yarns here. So if it needs to be outdoor, we have characteristics for that. Typically, most of these yarns we get in white, and in the dyeing process is where we add the color. So we'll go into that next. But this just shows you some of the yarns that we have. And so when I see this piece of artwork, man, what am I going to do? Is it a 2-layer, 3-layer, 4-layer? Is it on a novelty warp, a nylon warp, a polyester warp? Is it recycled? What yarns am I going to use? If I'm doing 3 filling systems, do I want to have 2 flat yarns and a novelty yarn that comes in? Is it going to be for our inside out application where it all needs to be light fastness? So getting color on those yarns. And I did it kind of in levels of intensity or durability, if you will. So the first one's solution dye. And so that's where you basically, when you take the polymer, it's typically clear or white. And then I have polymer that's in color and I mix them together. When you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, they don't have 12 million colors of paint on the shelf. They have white and they have color that goes into that. And you specify whatever you want. Very, very similar here. In this extrusion process, you have all the color up top. It gets melted, so it is purely saturated. You can't take the color back out of a paint once you put it in there. Same thing with this solution dye. So the raw material has the color in it. You make the yarn, you weave the fabric, you set it, and then you have a finished fabric. Yarn dyeing is somewhat similar to that, but you are dyeing the individual packages. So you're not extruding it in that color. You have a natural fiber, and then you dye that one package, like you see there, the cone, and then you have the fabric and you set it. And then the last one is piece dyeing. That's where you're basically weaving a white piece of fabric. The warp is white, the filling is white, And then I have a customer that says, I want 100 yards of blue. Well, you cut off that fabric, you put it into a big chamber, you dye it blue, you pull it out and hope that blue is the standard that they're looking for. So it's great that I can dye 100 yards blue, 500 yards green, but you're dyeing the fabric. And so when we talked about that woven structure, that tight tabby, if the dye has to penetrate under each one of these fibers, sometimes it doesn't penetrate. The other problem with, or limitation with piece dyeing, I can only dye it one color. I can't dye this area purple, this area leave it white, and this area something else. So that's where piece dyeing is generally one color. So I have intense color, very strong saturated color, and then very limited color in those different processes. Everything that we do at Valdez is either solution dyed at the top for our inside out application, because we need that durability, we need the light fastness, or we do yarn dyeing. We are dyeing the components, and then we build this fabric from all the dyed pieces. Again, gives us a lot of flexibility. So I mentioned in the making that yarn process, so those are the little pellets. They're already teal. We add that to a base of just clear to make that color saturated. So you can see it in the bottom left. I talked about that shower head, the spinneret. All those little fibers are little teeny spider webs coming down right here. And so there are 64 in each one of those strands coming down. It builds a package that you see in the middle, just these bright, shiny packages. And then I combine those to make my novelty yarns. Dyeing, if it's not through the extrusion process or solution dyed, it's package dyeing, which is the left. You see a little package. It's typically about 4 pounds. It's just a cotton yarn. It's loaded onto a carrier. It's put down into a dye pot, which is like a pressure cooker. And so it's pressurized, it's heated. It goes in for 2 to 4 hours. The color is immersed onto this. It's very durable. And then we can dye 50 pounds, 100 pounds. With that solution dyed process, you typically want to do thousands of pounds. So it's very limited on your color options. Down here in package dyeing, I can dye one package. No sweat, just put one package in. Not real efficient, but we typically will dye 200 pounds, 400 pounds, 1,000 pounds, all the way up to 2,800 pounds. We can also, I talked about making our warps. So that's what the tall beam is there. It's a warp beam. So we also do beam dyeing. So if you've heard beam dyeing, that's just adding color to the warp, or package dyeing, which is dyeing an individual package. And you see all the ones in the bottom with the beakers there. So back in chemistry class and science class, where I'm like, man, I'll never use any of this stuff. I don't, because I'm not in the dye house. They've actually banned me from being in the dye house, but don't. So they will add all that color with these different formulas. And we basically have about 9,000 formulas for all the different yarns that we dye. So then we go to the warps. So there are 600 packages here up in the top left on a creel stand. It goes to the bottom left, which is making just that one beam that we saw that was dyed. So that woman's job all day, every day, for 8 hours a day is tying knots. So there are hundreds, thousands, millions of unsung heroes that sit there to do all these small tasks to create this beautiful fabric and all the fabrics that you're seeing here. There are so many craftsmen that are doing these little things that make this whole process work. So we dye the beams, you can see in the bottom picture there, and then we slash it or combine all of those together. It can either be a solid color or it can be multicolored. They have to put lease rods in and get it prepped, because this is happening in a building. Any guess how many threads are here? 400, 800, 1,200, 9,600 threads are made right here. And then we got to transport that to another building, put it out on a loom, and tie in 9,600 threads. And we do that every time we change a warp. And we change a warp every 2 days. Every loom that we have, we change out every 2 days. And in a lot of cases, there are 9,600 threads that have to be done. Luckily, there's a little machine called a knot tire. It ties 6 knots a second, and it goes all the way across the loom, just doing this. tying knots. I don't give them a lot of praise because it's a machine and it doesn't really understand anything. So then it goes into weaving. That's kind of the pulse of the mill. That's where kind of a lot of the excitement happens, because you basically take all these components and you put it into a device that only knows ones and zeros, and you get amazing stuff. And it's really cool to see that coming right off from somebody's idea to fabric that's just rolling off the loom. So it's pretty amazing. A lot of different parts here. You can see the weavers that are down here at the looms. She had a thread break, so Lydia's working on tying that thread back. You've got drop wires in the back in the upper left-hand corner that if any of those warp threads breaks, a metal pin drops and the loom shuts off. It says, I don't have what I need. Your end is broken. And I know that when you created that red-white file, you wanted those two ends to be together. And if one of them's broken, you're not going to get that. So I'm going to stop. They fix it. They tie it. The loom says, I made a mistake on that last pick. I'm going to back up. I'm ready to go. It picks up right where it left off. So you may have no defect where a filling stop or a warp stop. Truly, truly amazing. Again, 28 years. And I know everything that goes into this, and I'm still, it's a miracle. It's somehow a miracle every time. So here's where it happens. Just to give you this is the sleigh or the reed that beats up, crams the fabric together. These are the warp threads, and the filling will be inserted from the side. I think it's about 20 seconds just to watch that. So warp, weft, and a machine, and it just cranks out the fabric just like that. That was pretty quick. You can actually see, I mean, just in those few seconds, we saw it weaving about an inch or two. Well, if the insertion or the density is pretty low, it comes off pretty quick. But imagine if it has to throw 140 threads in 1 inch. You can sit there and look at it, and it's like, I don't think it's doing anything. This was broken over here because it's not doing anything. And it is that slow. So some of the costs that a manufacturer does is, what is my output per loom, per hour, per day? It's not just the components that go in it. It's how long does it take me to just weave 1 yard? And so we take that into account. So now this next video is same thing, but they're going to slow it down so you can see what happens. It doesn't seem like this is a good guessing group, so I'm going to throw it out there. We insert about 6 to 8 threads every second. And when I say insert, that means taking the thread all the way across the loom. It beats up, it changes. The next line of code throws, it advances, that beats up. The next one, 8 times a second is what you just saw. And those are our slow looms. We have some that are 12 insertions every second. And it's not just shooting them in, it's got to do all this other part as well. So we're going to slow this one down so you can see what that looks like. After we start that again, sorry, here's this one. So you can see where the rapier is exchanging a thread. Those two things come together. It beats up. You can see the strings are being lifted so that each one of those warp threads, 8 times a second, it's doing this. So luckily we have the slow motion technology now. And you can see here, this is a 3-layer fabric. And I know that simply for the fact that I see a white layer, I see a blue layer, and I see a purpley dark blue layer. So I know immediately that's a 3-layer fabric. So it's building those 3 layers, throwing white, throwing blue, throwing purple, white, blue, purple to create that fabric. So then once it's woven in production, it gets finished. We have about 250 different finishing combinations and a various degree depending on what the end use is. It's primarily a bunch of big boxes, not real exciting over there. And then we have an inspector. So we look at every fabric that we have at least 2 times. Some get a 3rd inspection. So they're just making sure. I kind of mentioned the lady that does the knot tying and all the threads. These people sit there 8 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week, and all they're doing is looking at yards of fabric. It's great when you go to Mary Jo's and you get to spend 20 minutes in there and your mind's blown. They do it every single day. Truly true. Some people love it. I would not be one of those people. So we do the inspection there. So our sustainability goes more than just how we're impacting the environment. That's a very big consideration that we have. So our carbon footprint, how we use water. Can we recycle that water? Can we reclaim it? Can we use heated water in one thing and then use that water again somewhere else? We recycle. We're really aware of our solid waste. And then it's even in the chemistry. How can we better utilize dye stuffs that don't need to be temperature as high? If we can do dyes that attach to that fiber at a lower temperature, man, that's better for everybody. It's better cost, better for the environment. And then how does our sustainability relate to our product? With the recycled content we talked about, whether it's recycled water bottles, we can make 100% water bottle fabric. As crazy as that is, you chop it up, you melt it, you extrude it, you spin it, you chop it, you make the fiber, and it's really cool. And then the ocean stewardship that we talked about, there's now polyester that you can have an enzyme that will break down a polyester the same way it does for cotton. So it doesn't live forever, long past us. It can break down in a 5-year cycle, 10-year cycle, something that's much better for our planet. Transparency and then safety. And then our people. I talked a lot about, the unsung heroes. So you're going to see all these people that are the face of the company, but there are hundreds of people behind them doing all these little calculations and jobs that show all this beautiful fabric. We're 100% ESOP. We really focus on safety, diversity, inclusion, community investment, and then volunteerism. And that's it. That's all I know about textiles. So thank you for your time. Are there questions, anything that I didn't cover? And I am not insulted. If you've got plenty of other things, I'm amazed that I only lost 1 person. So I'm thrilled. So thank you. But feel free to leave at any time. But I would love to answer any questions that you may have. And again, I've got an appointment at about 5 o'clock, so I can talk for another 5 hours, believe it or not. Anything that you're dying to know? Yes.
So how is embroidered fabric done? Like, how is that?
Yeah.
I don't know, is that a different process completely?
It is. Great question. So embroidery is a whole different process. We take a lot of our fabrics. A base fabric is what we call it, typically a plain fabric that's one color. And then it goes over to an embroidery machine that generally will have positions of yarn that you can select any yarn, any color that you want. And unfortunately, all those are on a set stationary thing that they can move a little bit, but they're kind of in their channel. And so they're just going to do what they can do, but that's how you add it on top of a fabric. Yeah, now that's typically kind of ours, but there are some machines that only focus and they cover the whole fabric and do this very ornate multicolor. Yeah, it's a whole different process. Very similar to that, but it's much more time intensive. So that's where it amazes me that when I see this beautiful embroidered fabric from Turkey and it's $11, and I'm like, that probably took like 10 hours to make a yard and they're selling it for $11. How is that even possible? But so yeah, it's a different machine, but kind of the same processes. Anything else?
I'm curious about your abrasion testing and where it's marketed.
It's just a different machine that uses different testing substrates there. But yeah, it's the same. Weizenbeek or Martindale. It's just one's more European. So it's kind of like, hey, well, if you Americans have that, we're going to come up with our own and we're going to test it And you might have some people that say, well, this is more indicative. Unfortunately, with abrasion, it is somewhat kind of subjective, and it's not really a true indicator of necessarily the durability of the fabric, but it's all we've got for right now. Yeah, so just a kind of a different test. Yeah, kind of a different brand. That's a good question. Yes. Fantastic. Yeah, so recycled cotton, the cotton that we use is actually a manufacturer gets the leftover when you knit a shirt or knit fabric, and then you have cut and sew operations that cut out these patterns to make a shirt, a t-shirt. They actually chop all that cotton up and they blend it and they make a new fiber. And so it comes back from the leftover waste from a t-shirt manufacturing process. There aren't a lot of reclamation processes for cotton. That's really the one that is most used in the industry, that it's kind of leftover waste from generally from a garment facility. Most of the time we have challenges is that you have cross blending of fibers. Most things are not 100% something. So it's very difficult to really reclaim things when it's part of it's polyester, part of it might be nylon, part of it might be cotton. How do I make a fiber that I can then sell to you in a consistent basis that is the same every time? So it's hard. Is there anything that you're familiar with that maybe will jog my memory about cotton or? Yep. So we will use those. So we make a lot of our own yarn, but then we do buy things where there are specialists that reclaim this. It's such a big supply chain. Somebody else does that. And in those cases, we buy the yarn. It's one of the few yarns that we already buy in color because they're making red t-shirts and gray t-shirts and black t-shirts. And so they have to blend these to make a consistent red. That's our big thing, that we're very blessed that we have a dye house because we have to be the same color every time. When you buy fabric from us or anybody, you don't want it to be one color one time and then a completely different red shade the next time you buy it. And that's really where the dye house helps us, and where it is a little limiting in what you do with recycled content. Our primary use is plastic for recycled polyester, and it's always clear, except for the one company that decides to have colored bottles, and that is, or the product, Sprite. Sprite wants green. Well, we can't do anything with green unless you want green fabric. So unfortunately, you can't recycle Sprite bottles. So I think they are doing now clear more with a green lid. So kudos. So somebody in their advertising department said, we can't recycle any of this. This is harmful to the environment. And so that probably what drove Sprite to no longer have green. They may still have it some. I know that I've seen a lot of clear Sprite, and it's 100% because you can't recycle it. So kudos to Pepsi or Coke or whoever makes that one. But no real challenge. I mean, once you take that polyester and you melt it, it's just like it was virgin. There's not a difference. So a melted polyester is going to perform very, very similar to a virgin polyester. We can't use it because I can't, when it's on a cutting room floor, it's probably in multiple colors, and I can't digest that back. Now, what happens is there are places that will take that polymer, will chop it up, and will use it for pillow fill or trunk liners, non-wovens, things that it's not critical for color. They need a filtration or something, and maybe they can bleach it out, but we can't do that. Still work. Yes. I'm not as familiar with, all that recycling is not, I don't spend a lot of time with that, but Cheyenne's with the company, and she's really trying to kick off our recycling effort and how do we continue that path of good stewardship in all the practices that we have. Fantastic. Thank you for spending some time with me this morning. Enjoy the rest of your time here in High Point.
I was getting text, stepped out about how well it was going and how entertaining it was.
Oh,
So,
good.
yeah.
Text from outside.